right. Welcome. Hello.
Hello.
So, as promised, I think it was over a month ago that I even announced in the season finale from season 1. I was like, I'm so excited. I'm going to have a friend with me. Well, finally, here we are. So,
Hello.
if you want to introduce yourself really quick.
My name is Rowan, and I have been friends with Gabby for many years. We had a bit of a break, but we're back in it. We're back in the flow, which I'm super grateful for. What?
Me too. I'm grateful for it too. Yeah. So, as promised, now we're starting this flow of having Rowan and I open up episodes, talk a little bit about what to expect. So we'll be a familiar face to join me. So it's not just me talking at a camera at the opening of each episode. I'm so excited and I'm so grateful for you to be a part of this. So this episode that we're introducing here, I had an amazing conversation with Aylwin, and I had just met him at this leadership conference I had met him there like 2 days before having the conversation. Yeah, he had shared with the group, and I was like, wow, he seems like such an interesting person. I want to get to know him better, just as a human in general, and also what an incredible story he would have to share, because he was talking about his passion to help children build their emotional intelligence and their awareness so that they have the tools to navigate the world more effectively and with more resilience. And he mentioned fleeing genocide as part of what really led to this passion. Wow, person after my own heart to really want to use these tools and techniques to help kids. And then the more I talked to him, I was like, and then when he came on to share what's going to be a 2-part episode, like the more he shared, I was like, oh man, you're going to be such a perfect guest. And then as he was sharing, and he's just like pouring out his entire life. And what I thought was going to be an hour was like 2.5 hours. And I gotten to the point where we were like at time, and I was like, I can't cut him off. I need to continue holding space for this conversation because it's so meaningful. He was so clear on like, this was a pivotal moment. This was a pivotal moment. This was a pivotal moment.
Yeah, he really was.
Yeah.
I was really impressed by that. Yeah. And how he came in, he's like, here's my pillow. He just like, this is helping me. I was like, you know what? You just say that right at the beginning, like, I need this pillow here. I was like, yes.
Yeah, just like the closest thing to a weighted blanket to have is like, this conversation is going to be intense. And I had no idea how intense that conversation was going to get. And so incredible conversation, a lot to sit through, both like emotionally, and it's a time commitment certainly to listen to his story, but it's certainly well worth the time investment. And it's something I was giving DJ a digest of his story, and he was like, I think when you give the content warning, you need to tell people like, listen to this conversation as you're on the way to like hug your family. Like make sure that you surround yourself with love after, because it's even for me, like I know going back to my family after stopping that recording, I was like, oh my god, I'm so grateful for you guys. I love you all so much.
I really like there is like a funniness in that, but it is such an intense conversation to be a part of and to be witnessing and having the honor to experience. I would say definitely for me, I felt like I was like, wow, the sense of honor, but also the sense of like looking at what I also have and all of those connections of like just all the things that we go through. It was just a very empowering and powerful story.
Yeah. So much so. That was so perfectly put. Yeah. And I'm so honored that he trusted me to hold that space and to be a steward of sharing his story. So I hope that everyone listening can like feel that as well. And especially something that someone, when I met him at first, he's like, oh yeah, I helped design video games and I helped design movies and these things. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's super cool. And then to learn more about him, I'm like, whoa! And what felt so powerful about that as just a theme in general is his story is a perfect one to demonstrate like don't judge people based on this much information that you get on them. Because the depth that he got into, I think, is like the perfect demonstration of how rich the depth of people are. And so I hope that's a big takeaway for people too.
That's a really good thing to touch on for sure.
So some content warning. I would say there's a lot of content warning. What are some of the first ones that come up for you?
Well, the first one being violence and violence towards others. I would also say violence towards like younger kids being a big thing because he's what he's fleeing and the ages of which he was experiencing such as violence. And there is some. I would say he actually was a lot more detail oriented and a little bit more graphic than I was like expecting. And so that would be like the first one that really came. That was the one that hit me the most in like the first couple of minutes of listening to his conversation.
Yeah, and I would say it's constant too. So yes, it's very graphic, and while still being like he covers it very well, and he doesn't like really like sink into it, but it's something to be aware of. Something else I would add is there's conversation around suicide, and he had talked about multiple suicide attempts later in the conversation, and about his experience being someone who had attempted suicide multiple times and then where he is now. So I would also say be extremely mindful of that as you're listening.
There's talks about depression and his and some other family members also their mental health struggles and some of the things they were going through. And I would say that take care in working with those, especially if there's something that's triggering for you. Be another one that came up.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and another one that hit me pretty heavily is he talks about the loss of his child. So having a stillborn child, just like I had chills and I felt it, especially like having having like my baby was in the next room over during that, and I was just like listening to the story and thinking like, oh, I just want to squeeze her right now. So yeah. Love your family. Love your family after listening to this one. A lot to be aware of.
What to hold.
A lot to hold, and it's not yours to hold either. I think is something that's really important to also mention. So,
and it is a recording, so it's also okay to just pause and come back, or
take care
of yourself in whatever way possible. I think that's a really big thing to talk about. With all the innovation of technology and the connections that we're feeling, it's so amazing to connect, and it's so amazing to have these experiences and really see like what lies beneath, that veil of, hey, I've made video games. Hey, I work in this aspect. I work in this sector. Oh, actually, I've had a really long life filled with all these experiences, and we've all had that, and we all interact, and those all interact in different ways, and we have to take care of ourselves and resource ourselves in certain ways to just be there with it.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect point.
Yeah.
I will not be offended if you press pause. Take care of yourself. I won't know if you press pause.
That's true. I was like, whoa, wait.
Don't marathon for the sake of me or anything. But yes, please take care of yourself while you're listening to this. And if you or anyone that is struggling, especially with suicide, please reach out to resources. We certainly want you here. I know there's a lot of people that do want you here. 988 is the national hotline to call or text.
Yeah. Is there 411 now? Did they start that one out yet?
I'm not sure. We'll have to look to do a little check at the end of this episode. Yes, this is part 1 of Aylwin's episode. Part 2 will be out on Thursday, and then our next regularly scheduled guest episode will be available next Monday. So enjoy this episode with Aylwin.
Enjoy.
Well, welcome to the Nexus of Narratives. Thank you so much, Aylwin.
You're welcome.
You got your like emotional support pillows.
This is my blanket.
Yeah. Instead of it's the closest thing we could get to a weighted blanket.
I don't know. I've been finding having something like this has eased up the tension a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Takes off the stress.
Yeah.
Converse, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and so I've, similar to several folks that were having a series of conversations while here in Cabo for a conference on working on our own personal growth. So grateful to meet you and experience your parts of your story and your vulnerability thus far, and I'm really excited to dig deeper. So thank you already.
Oh, you're welcome.
And if you were to bump into someone just in line to get coffee or tea or whatever, and you just had a quick moment to share who you are, what would you say?
I would say, hi, my name is Aylwin Fernando. I am either 45 or 46 years old. I'm not sure right now because I can't do the math. And I'm a visual effects artist that works in feature film, commercials, TV. I've worked in computer games. I'm currently working on a computer game, a studio in Seattle. I live in Vancouver, and I've lived in many countries around the world. Some by choice, some by not. And it's been a very interesting journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amazing. Quick nutshell. I love getting that little piece that it's just like, someone, he does this visual arts work, and that's it. Sometimes we just dismiss people based on like this much information that we get from them before we get to dig in.
All the prejudgments, I guess, right? Like preconceived notions we have, prejudices. So you tell me how you'd like to start.
I was just going to say, start wherever you would like. My invitation was to share some pivotal moments in your life, and wherever that feels relevant to begin as we evolve, I'll leave that up to you.
Sure. So there's a lot of pivotal moments, I would say. Some of it gets pretty dark. Some of it gets pretty sad. However, I've still survived, right? So I think that's kind of a story and a thing that you'll probably see a thread in my story. So okay, let's start. And there's a lot that we have to go through. I think I'll try and cover as much detail as possible. I'm just going to preface some of my dates might be a bit off, just chronologically. It's very hard to keep track sometimes. And I was doing some tests last week, funny enough, for dyslexia, and I believe I'm pretty dyslexic. So I'm just starting to probably fall into that group. So, which explains my spelling and everything. So that we'll get into that. That actually feeds into the insecurities of growing up. Okay, so I was born in Sri Lanka in 1979, February, Pisces, best month of the year. Best sign. And I was born to my mom and my dad. My mom's Sinhalese, my dad's Tamil. Very important to state that now because we're going to thread later. And I was born in this tiny little town called Rakmalana, or I was born in the hospital in Colombo, but resided in Rakmalana, which is like 40 kilometers from Colombo. And it was, Sri Lanka is a tropical country. It was coming up. It was under British rule called Ceylon, all that stuff. And, you're a regular kid growing up in their own house, and then the war breaks out. Now, the war is a racial war. If you read the history books and all that, there's different versions as to why it started, depending on who you ask. Me being half Tamil, half Sinhalese, I'm right down the middle, right? So the war was between the Sinhalese versus Tamil. The majority in Sri Lanka is Sinhalese. The government's run by the Sinhalese. And then, unfortunately, it became a genocidal war that was waged against the Tamil in the northern part of the country. And I heard both sides, right? Because I can hear both sides because I'm down the middle. And me and my brother, we were caught in the middle of it. And I'll get into the family stuff later. However, when the war broke out, I was around 3 or 4 years old. It was 83. It's called the 83 riots. And essentially, I was in a Montessori downtown in Colombo, which is 40 kilometers away. I'm pretty sure it's 40 kilometers away. It's been a while. And it's a place called Tiny Tots. And I was there playing with all my friends, and the riots started out where the government said to pretty much kill all the Tamils in the country. Right? Like, whoever you find. And so all I remember, and I was having this conversation today with somebody else, and all the stories I've heard that my mom's told me about that day have been me in the Montessori by myself. Everyone else has left. All the kids have gone. All the teachers have left. There was one teacher that waited as long as she could, but she had to go save her kids. So I was just left there playing in the sandpit. And I believe I remember seeing the whole city on fire and everyone just running from left of frame to right of frame. They were all going in one direction because the war was coming from the northern part down to the southern part of the country. And so apparently my mom finally got there after a few hours because all the buses were fleeing and the buses were full. She came in, grabbed me, and we took 5 buses to get back. I forget how many hours. It's usually 45 minutes bus ride. I think it was around 4 or 5 hours before you got home because you just couldn't get on a bus. People were hanging off. Yeah. And that day, my brother had already been picked up by another person because he was at a different school. He was older. So they brought him back home. And the neighbor had brought him back home. And my mom brings me home. And, you know, when you're in a civil war, you don't know what to do. And I'm 4 years old. The mob started showing up. Like all these people going around, pretty much killing and burning people. So I remember my mom grabbed us and we went outside the house and we went around the back, around the front of the house and to the back of our neighbor. And he was a friend of ours, a childhood friend. We used to play with all the time. And his house was being rioted. Like the mob were in his house, going through his house because someone had said, these guys are Tamil. And these are your neighbors, right? And I remember seeing a guy on top of the roof and in Sinhalese shouting, this is what happens to you if you're Tamil. And the house is on fire. And he's got a baseball bat in his hand or a cricket bat or something. And I don't know why my mom decided to take us there, but that's one image that it feels like a movie set, right? Anyway, so we go back to our house, and then guess what? The mob comes around to our house. And my mom told us, it's not safe for you guys to be here. And she hid us in our neighbor's house across the street, across the lane pretty much, in their closet, right? We were hiding in the closets. And my mom is a very strong woman, like extremely strong. And there's like a mob of 50 men. They come and say, who lives in this house? And she's very commanding. Says, nobody lives in this house. This is Sinhalese. And you can see that we were Catholic. My dad was Catholic, so we had Virgin Mary up there on the wall. So it was not saying that the Tamils weren't Catholic either. My dad was Tamil. Right? Luckily, he wasn't there. He would have been killed. Right? He was off in Dubai trying to make a living for us to live. So that was that was pretty intense, right? So that's how my life started, and we ended up leaving to Dubai or Sharjah, which is a little town 10 kilometers east, I believe. I think it's east of Dubai, and being refugees there. That was the first time I'd be a refugee in my life, and I'm 3-4 years old. I don't know what's going on. I remember getting on a plane for the first time. Right, to the back of the plane, because I think everyone's just fleeing the country. That was the only way they could get as many people fast off out of the country. So everyone left to like England, Australia, the Middle East, everywhere. So my dad was there in Sharjah working for a year, I think. So we went and joined. And we lived in a 1-bedroom, all 4 of us. And I thought it was cool, right? It's like, oh, party, adventure, all this stuff, right? And you don't really think about it. And had a pretty cool childhood, I guess, growing up for a couple of years, and then it started becoming very difficult. That's when you start growing up. So we lived there for around 5 or 6 years, and you realize 5 or 6 years that you can start to see your family conflicts. Right? You start to understand that stuff. And I remember my parents weren't getting along. They were just not doing well. And my dad being a very headstrong person, my mom being a very headstrong person, very powerful people in their own right, and my dad being he was a hockey captain of the country, right? He was the national captain. He had left all that just to come and make a living. And my mom comes from a political side of the country. So, but my mom loved family, and she wanted to be around her family and all this stuff. People getting killed. She doesn't know what's going on. My dad doesn't know what's going on with his family because they were an interracial marriage at that time in 77, 78, 76, I think. And the families never talk to each other because it's interracial. They go to love marriage or an arranged marriage, like it was common back then. Still kind of common, but not as much. So families not getting along. There's a lot of abuse in the family. And looking back, it was very tense all the time in the house. Like everyone was either crying, my mom was either crying, my dad was angry, or there was just like punishments or guilt, shame, all this stuff. And it was just a very stressful time. So it came down to a point where it was so bad, and we had moved into a bigger house. It was so bad. It's like 5 years into living in Saja. In a country you don't speak the local language. Who do you hang out with? You hang out with other Sri Lankans. All this stuff. And my dad was building a community, and it was all good for him. But for my mom, she felt alone because of all my dad's friends, right? Like his connections through hockey. But my mom was also the national captain of the women's. She was Asia's best center forward. So unfortunately, my dad's voice was so big. I feel my mom's voice wasn't heard. And I guess back then, it was whatever the guy says goes, right? So that was kind of the mentality they grew up with. And my dad was very strong because when he grew up, he had no shoes. Right? He would go to school barefoot sometimes. All right, and through all that hardship, it's what propelled him to be this overachiever. So when you get to that point, in that sense, without guidance, you have a lot of, I guess, arrogance that gets built up. A lot of talent that comes with a lot of arrogance. So his viewpoint was a little off in achieving his goals. But that was a survival technique. So
I grab this because of the pool party that's happening and screaming in the background.
And here we are in a pool party. It's all good. And so now that the family is getting a little fractured, I remember there's one incident, and this ties in heavily into my life. So one is the war, and now two, it's the family's breaking apart. However, there's this one incident where my dad had told me the day before, be ready at 7:30 in the morning to take it to school. Because if he lost his job, we were all done. And I'm like 5 years old. I don't know how serious this stuff is. And I wasn't ready. And he grabbed me by my throat and he threw me across the room. Because he was so on so much fire. Because he wasn't a minute or two late, he was done. Right? And I only realized this 3 years ago when I was going through therapy. That was the incident that one incident shut me down for the rest of my life. So that was the time. So when I flew across the room, I remember not crying. I don't remember the pain, but I remember seeing my mom's face of shock and telling my dad not to do it. But it was already done. But however, that was the day I stopped singing, I stopped laughing, I stopped smiling. And I told myself, I don't belong.
Hmm.
I don't belong in this family. I don't belong in this life or this planet. So, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that that's what I said to myself. And that, unfortunately, would be with me for 35 more years.
35 more years.
35 more years. And that's where all my depression would stem from. And my bipolar would stem from. And your insecurities or your values stem from. So that's kind of one of the pivotal points. And so what did my parents decide to do? Because it got so bad. I remember seeing my mom cry. I think my mom tried to commit suicide. I believe she did try. Not 100% sure. And I remember telling my mom, I was like 4 years old, I'll take care of you. Because she was in such a bad state. So what did my parents do? They decide, they should split up the family. So me, my brother, and my mom end up going back to Sri Lanka because one, it was too expensive to have a family in Dubai with my dad's salary to live. We were going to a Catholic school that was speaking English. So I guess it was somewhat semi-private, so it was a lot more money. And so they decided to send us back to Sri Lanka. And I joke with my friends now saying, my parents thought a war zone was safer than living in the same room together. Same house, right? So we go back to a war zone in Sri Lanka, and the war's kind of subsided a little bit.
And how many years was it between you fleeing versus then coming back?
Around so 83, we went back in 89, I believe. So 88 or 89. So around, I don't know what's that, 5
So you're
years.
still less than 10 years old.
Yeah, I'm still in single digits.
Yeah.
Right. So when I get back, I'm in grade 4. So I would have been around 8 years old, I think. And growing up, me and my brother watched cartoons. My parents worked all the time, and they were never at home. So it was just me and my brother playing with Lego, watching cartoons, getting in trouble. It was just ridiculous, like looking back, like I said, it would never fly nowadays, right? What we got through. Or I got stitches in the back of my head from getting in fights with my brother, and mom saying she comes home and there's blood on the walls and no kids. Like, what's going on, right? And me and my brother got into an argument. And I hit my head, and my dad had come and picked us up. No cell phones, so rushed me to the hospital, get stitches. But it was all good, And anyways, we ended up going back so that my dad could provide for us to have a life. My mom wanted to be back anyways with her family. So we go back to Sri Lanka. Now I'm 8. My brother's about 10 years old-ish. We're back in a country. We can't speak the language, can't read the language, can't write the language. And what do? Now you got to go to an international private school again, which is now way more expensive, right? And so now my dad has to work like crazy to put us through school. And he does that for 14 years with like 4 heart attacks, multiple strokes, high cholesterol, all this stuff, right? Completely supports us financially. And we would only see him maybe once every 3 to 4 years for 2 weeks at a time, right? And I think he came once for a month or 2 months. But I'm in school, like I never got to hang out with him really. But it was always nice when he ever came to visit. I think one of my cherished memories is I knew he was coming. I didn't know what date it was. And then I'm at the school and I see him at the gate waiting to pick me up. And he used to do that when we went to Dubai. So that's where it is. Anyways, we go back to Sri Lanka. I'm in grade 4. New country, I think, coming from a first world country, I should know more, right? You're a kid, that's what we're taught. It's a better country, better education, all this stuff. You go back there, the education is way higher than in Saja. So I come in, and my brother is like the perfect student, right? Like he is extremely intelligent. He comes in, does the entrance test to the school. He doesn't even go to grade 6. They go from 5 to 7 because he was so good. Me, not so much. Right? I got shoved in there into grade 4. And now he's doing all cool because his, what do you call it? His value that he sees himself is real. Mine is not, right? And everyone just, and this is old school stuff, parenting. It's like, why don't you be like your brother? Why don't you get his marks? Why can't you do what he's doing? As opposed to, hey, I'm doing my own thing, like support me, right? So that takes a big toll on me. And now, what do I do as a kid? And my dad's not around. I rebel in the way I know how to rebel. I'm going to do exactly the opposite of what you told me to do. So I purposefully get low marks. I purposefully don't care. I was never a bad kid. I didn't do anything evil or wrong or anything. I cheated on my exams, got suspended, got all this stuff. Parents didn't know about that. I was like, oh yeah, they sent me early today. Little whatever's, right? Anyways, I get through. However, my self-worth is completely being destroyed. My brother's doing really great. My dad's, working really hard to put us in school and getting like pretty much F's everywhere. And grade 7 comes around, and it was very interesting. I knew I was not going to pass. Like I failed way too many classes. I was going to be held back. And in Sri Lanka, education is considered like the thing, right? Like that's how you are valued in society, how well you're educated, or what job you have. And not going to pass. And this is another pivotal moment. The war erupts again. And they bombed the school right next to our, bombed the television station in front of our school. That was a national TV station. Like we are writing our exam. I was like, I'm going to fail. I'm writing my math exam that I'm going to fail. And they bombed the TV station. And I remember the teacher running back into the room thinking, oh, I thought a blackboard fell down. She knew exactly what had happened, but she didn't say it. And she's like, give us a sec. And then she comes back 10 minutes later. She just wanted to make sure we were all safe. It's like, you guys should all go home now. And so we all leave. We didn't know what had happened. And then we hear about it. And then the next day, it's like, yeah, school's canceled for the rest of the year. It's too dangerous. So we all got promoted to the next grade. That's the only reason I made it to grade 8 is because I got promoted by that incident. People died in that bomb blast, right? Like, you could ask anyone at that time, you would take the school bus from Ratmalana all the way to Colombo. And on a daily occurrence, you would see bomb squads on the side of the road diffusing bombs. Like you're just in the bus, like the school bus. No, look at what's going on. Oh,
Casually heading to school.
Casually heading to school. You just see bomb squads diffusing bombs. And I can tell you there was one day me and my brother were taking the bus, and it was a really bad time. Like the government was changing a lot. There was lots of assassinations happening at the time. A new president had come in, and I believe he had connections to the mob, or that's what they say. And people going missing all the time with white vans would show up, take people, they would never be seen again. And it was a lot of intimidation and it was very corrupt. And I remember taking the bus one day, and I was probably grade, I don't know, 10, 11, probably 10, taking the bus in with my brother. And there was a man chopped up into pieces on the road, side of the road, just right in the middle of Mount Lavinia, Davler. There was 2 little towns that stretch. It was probably 7 in the morning. And that was he was purposely left there to make sure people were scared.
It's a message.
Right? It's a message. Mm-hmm. So you saw all that stuff, right? And I luckily wasn't in any combat or any situations where there were bullets flying around. But I remember taking the bus and this all leads up to my worldview, right? Taking the bus where we lived by the army base in Ratmalana, by the Ratmalana airport that was heavily used by the army to transport military for the war. And you always heard the planes coming in with all the casualties, all the ambulances, and you knew it was just nonstop. They were coming in. And it was very sad, very, very troubling to see all that, to be exposed. There's checkpoints everywhere. You can't go for dinners, none of that. There's curfews at 6 o'clock at certain days. So we had to shut all our lights off and work or do our homework in a small little candle light, right? So all those things. So while all this is going on, I got to figure out what am I going to do now? I should probably start studying, right? Because there's no way that's ever going to happen and we're going to have a grade 1 and pass. So this is another pivotal moment. So for the whole time in my life, I've been telling myself, you're not smart. Because everyone has reinforced that, why don't you be like your brother? Why aren't you getting the grades? And then in grade 8, we had to learn equations, how to solve an equation, x equals y or x equals y plus whatever, right? Y equals whatever. And I didn't know how to do it. And my brother taught me how to do it. And he sat with me for one night for like 4 hours. And he always used to do this, help me with my school. And he just taught me all this stuff. And for some reason, I got it. I actually got it within 4 hours. I didn't know it. I go in and, okay, now I shouldn't cheat on tests, right? Like everyone knew I cheated on tests. And the teachers would like shame me in front of all the kids, right? I was like, okay, let's try this without cheating for once. So I write the exam. I was like, whatever, like the test and so on. And I think the next week we get the marks, and I beat everyone in the class and all the classes. I got perfect. It was the first time in my life I felt, oh, I might actually have some intelligence. And I still use that test to this day, that incident. And now I pick up new technology or new ideas in life that I want to explore. I still have the program that tells me you're not smart, because that's so ingrained. But I go back to that, hey, if I could pass that one test and beat everyone, I could figure this out.
And what was it about, like, learning with your brother? Because then you had that knowledge, you had that information, you said, somehow I just got it.
I think my idea of learning changed. Only recently I would watch my brother, how he studied. I was like, he just looked at a book and he would just be looking at his books in bed. He wouldn't be writing anything down. He'd just be looking at his books. And so I was like, okay, I'll look at my books. It didn't work for me, right? But I think what it was is that I had now a purpose to not fail. I didn't want to lose my friends. My friends would go to the senior school. I would still be left behind. So I didn't want to be left behind. I wanted to make sure I got to the next level, so I could still be with my friends since grade 4. I still talk to these guys, even until today. And I think I finally found a reason to study. Not because someone told me, it was my own reason to study. And it proved to me that, hey, I could actually get through this stuff. So
one thing I'd like to highlight something that I'm hearing in that is because this moment where your father threw you.
Yeah.
I'm picturing and I'm feeling like heartbreak and like a sense of disconnection.
Well, I was always disconnected from my dad. Me and my brother both were, because he was never around when we were becoming adults, right? He would only show up in vacations or every 2, 3, or 4 years. There was no male figure in the, in our world. In your family. It was just my mom. And that becomes very unhealthy too, because my brother's extremely intelligent, smart, and strong, all that stuff. But there's no alpha male, if you want to put it that way in those terms. I don't care for the term alpha male, but there's no male authoritative figure to guide my brother. So he becomes extremely aggressive in his way of being because he gets bullied in school.
Okay.
Right? So he's so smart. Kids are bullying him in school. He is reflecting that on the family. Right? But he also knows he's extremely smart.
Yeah.
Right? So it was like I was in a family of giants, honestly. Right? Like my dad's this massive accomplishment. He's got medals and honors everywhere. My brother's this super student. My mom's this very strong individual, and here I am, this guy who's getting tossed around everywhere. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, I'm picturing this like cartooned version where you see everyone else is so much larger.
Well, they just felt untouchable, right? And I was not someone who wanted to become aggressive. I was making sure I didn't become them. Right?
Oh, right.
I was making sure I didn't become them. It's like, you guys value each other so much. I'm pretty sure I don't want to be any of you guys because you guys are all jerks to me, right? So it was a very hard time. And then even in school, I never got bullied in school. I had one guy come up to me on day one in the senior school and say something about my mom. I was like, well, then why don't you go ask her? And I actually stood up to him. This guy, he had 9 toes, and that made him a badass. You can't even run with 9 toes. So it was like this myth, right? Like, oh, he had a horse or something, and his horse broke his toe or something. Oh, he must be a tough guy now. Yeah, like,
well, and the theme that I hear, though, is like these moments, in each of these pivotal moments was a sense of disconnection or separation. And then the moment that you realize, oh, if I continue on this path that I'm on, I will be disconnected from where I feel the greatest sense of belonging. In all of this shift and turbulence that I've had in my life, I finally feel like I have a place.
Yeah, finding that place didn't come to me until my 30s. So me and my brother had no roots. We didn't. We uprooted when we were like 3 and 5, uprooted again when we were 8 and 9, I think. And then again when you're like 16 and 18, right? It's like we kept jumping around so much. It's like kids who live on military bases that their parents go around everywhere. It's like, where are your roots? And I at least struggled with it for a very, very long time, right through college, right through university, right into my, even into my marriage. It's like, I don't even know where I belong. And it was not until I chose to move to Vancouver from Toronto, and we'll get to that, that I found my roots. I was like, okay, I think this might be it. Maybe. So the common thread is the belonging didn't exist. And then the belonging, if I ever found I was in a group, I would get scared and I would leave because I knew that was going to be taken from me anyways. That was the belief. Yeah. Because I didn't believe I fit in my family, which is like your first group that you need to feel comfortable. If you don't feel, at least I believe that if you don't feel accepted in your family, it makes it very, very tough to be accepted in the community, or then accepted in the world, or accepted in the universe. So my worldview through all this was being shaped as the universe is a dangerous place. There's no hope in it. And through all the self-development stuff that I've been doing, you are shown that, hey, it's possible to change that view and see the world as a positive, or the universe as a positive place to live in, full of love and hope. So that's where I'm now. So the journey to get there has been a bit of a long show. So where was I? So we got to college. I got to the high school. I got to my senior school.
You wanted to make sure you passed.
Yeah, make sure I passed. I got into the next stage, and I was in a British system, so you had to do your O levels and A levels, which are very, very tough exams. They're like entry level university exams, right? In grade 10 and grade 12. Anyways, I get through my O levels. My brothers finish school, and then the war breaks out again. It gets really bad. So forced to leave again, and we flee as refugees to Canada. Right. So okay. Second time leaving the country for the same war, because of the same war. And this time in Canada, I'm 16, my brother's 18. And at this point in life, I had brought my grades up for my O levels from an F to a B minus or a C. So I thought, okay, this is kind of doable. Like, now they're teaching me what I want to learn. No, there's no art in these schools. There's nothing to do with computer graphics. There's nothing to do with film or anything to do with art. It's all academia. It's biology. It's accounting. It's business, economics. Like, there's nothing fun about any of that for me, right? And all I wanted to do, I believe, was learn how to be an artist, from that time. And my dad had seen it, but unfortunately, my school stopped letting us do artwork in grade 5. There was no art after that. So I ended up leaving. My brother ended up leaving, my mom ended up leaving, go to Toronto. So now in Toronto, I got to go to the Western type of high school. Completely different culture shift. And in Sri Lanka, I had never encountered the word racist or racism. It didn't exist. And maybe it did, but in the English language, we never actually spoke it. Like, none of it actually, like, all my friends were some of the richest people in the country. Like, they all had private jets, all this stuff, right? They would fly to do shopping in other countries and come back from the weekend. Like, that's kind of the lifestyle some of these people had. But we all got along, Me and my brother were the poorest in the country. We didn't have a car. We sometimes didn't have money for food. Like, we would run out, right? And these guys, some of them had 6-7 BMWs in the 70s, 80s, right? I'm going to say where a lot of that money came from. However, like, it's questionable, probably, some of those sources, right? But some of them were very smart business people. I had good friends that were very, very wealthy. And for me, it was important to see that kind of lifestyle existed, and I could actually fit into it. But that's something I wanted, right? So now we get to Canada, and we're refugees. We're doing the whole refugee thing. And now they're claiming refugee status, all that stuff, and it takes a very long time, so around 7 years to get it, because there are some paper delays and all this stuff. For me, though, coming to Canada and trying to fit in was very hard. Even though I spoke English, I probably speak it better than most people, and to read, comprehension, writing, my spelling was terrible. And I'm realizing now it's always been terrible, probably because I'm dyslexic. I've taken 7 languages or 8 languages in my life. I can't remember a thing. I'm just not wired that way. I'm just trying to realize. Even when I try to code, it's very hard for me to remember syntax. I just cannot. History classes, I can't remember dates or times or years, and I switched numbers and letters. And I've been trying to figure out, I've been doing some research trying to figure out where this stems from. And I probably should get it clinically diagnosed if that's the thing, right? So I come to Canada, and now I got to fit in. We have no money. We're refugees. We're living in this place called 1050 Markham, which was like hub for all refugees in Scarborough and Toronto to start their life. It was this one little building with 200 units. And almost everyone, there's a lot of refugees that came and started there. And it's kind of a beacon of hope in some way, but it's also seen as a ghetto, right? It turned into that. However, I started going to high school. I come head to head with racism with some of the white teachers in the school. And I didn't know that I could call these people out. And I wasn't a violent kid. I wouldn't do any of that stuff or hit anyone. I've never hit anyone. I don't believe I would. No. But there's one teacher that was very racist, and all I wanted to do was slash his tires. And I would think he's still deserving of it. Because at that age is when you want to teach the kids not to be. Because there was a lot of kids in there that were super racist, and they came from troubled backgrounds. And from my understanding, some of those kids in that school who were the racists that I stood up against because they were making fun of these other students who were coming from India, and they were like downplaying them in the physical ed class, like. And I stood up for these kids, and I told them, you just can't speak to those people like that in any way. And unfortunately, the teacher took his side. And he told me not to talk about it. I was like, hold on a second here. I know that's wrong, but I didn't know I had rights to tell the principal to get this guy fired, which I probably should have. I probably would have saved that kid who was a racist from becoming a gang leader later on, right, in Scarborough. Anyways, so in Scarborough, it was very tough. I didn't fit in at all. And again, I don't feel part of a community at all. So what happens to my grades? It goes completely down the tubes. Again, same deal all over again. I'm back in grade 7, right? And I had a lot of good, it was easier for me to make friends. And I had one teacher, Mr. Chan, in shop class. I didn't even know what shop class was. I was like, oh, it sounds like fun. Just do it. So I did it. I made a lot of my good friends there. And he taught us, he used to work as an engineer at the Honda assembly plant in Canada or in China or Japan. I can't remember. He did somewhere. But he's a very, very intellectually smart, caring human. And he saw us, these kids, they were very eager, had lots of energy, but we had no direction. There was no one to guide us. So he said, why don't we just build a car? And it's like, okay, cool, that'd be fun. We all liked cars, right? So we started building this car, and it's like, well, it's going to be an electric car. This was in 95. So I started designing with my friends an electric car. And I ended up learning how to do AutoCAD, animation, all the stuff on my own, just for presentation purposes. And we designed these cars and we built them. I was the race car driver in them. And we raced them against the universities and we beat them. Wow. Except one. We could never beat Kings, which I forget which. Queens, I think, was the hardest one to beat. They had a good engineering program. One of them. We always came second, but we got overall across Canada, we got the best in a lot of things. And we did that 3 years in a row, and we won 3 years in a row. And that taught me that, hey, I can be good at something again. All right, it was all because of this teacher. And I barely made it into university, into mechanical engineering, because I didn't care what people told me to do. They never showed me a reason to do it or gave me a practical reason to do it, right?
That aligned with what drew you.
Yeah, exactly. And no one actually told me, hey, you're smart enough to do this. If someone had just said that or believed that I was smart enough and told me that, or held me up to a higher, like we learned today, a higher reputation to live up to, that would have been great. But all I got from home was, why aren't you good enough? Why aren't you this? Why aren't you this? And trying to navigate the whole academia system of the Western world is completely different than Sri Lanka. I had no idea. I had no idea what scholarships were or what any of these things were. My brother did because he was into this stuff. And anyways, I barely make it into engineering. I get into Ryerson. I go in there for a year. And after a year, I get so bored. You know, I aced. I think I got A+ in my drafting and mechanical and drawing, all of that. But in second year, I'm like sitting there wondering, like, do I really want to do this in life? But I'm doing this because my parents told me to do it. It's an Asian thing to do. So you're either a doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer. Like that's all there is in life. I'm from Sri Lanka, and doing this
Actually, common thread. I hear that from a lot of different immigrant families.
Yeah.
I've heard that from several, and that was my experience. My immigrant father from Greece was similar. Like, these are your options.
Yeah, and it's a survival mechanism, right? Like it's built in to survive, and then it turns, unfortunately, into a scarcity mindset and all these things, and it's just you're locked into this little box of what you can be, by yourself. So I understand the purpose for that is to make sure, hey, you don't fall on hard times again later. So it might be a backup plan, right? So one thing I did forget to mention, I meet my first day of school in Canada. I meet my best friend, Rajiv. He's still my best friend after 30 years now. We still talk. And, he was the first guy I sat behind and spoke to, and he shook my hand, he turned right. And I always beat him by 1 mark in biology. But he's now he's one of the smartest guys I know. Unbelievable human being, him and his wife. Just very kind people. Anyways, so I'll come back to Raji later. So where was I? University. So I get to university and I'm bored. I start drawing characters. I didn't take art classes or anything because that's what I loved doing. And one thing I did forget to mention, when I was in high school in Toronto, on my last year, I had some extra credits I needed to take to get in uni. So I took this creative writing class, and I was doing terrible in regular English class because my spelling was horrible. So I'd lose all my points of spelling. And it wasn't something that interested me to write essays. It really wasn't. Sure, I can tell stories, but why would I want to write an essay on this stuff? Why do I want to interview or analyze 2 books? Right? Unless, I don't understand, and I still don't understand what that assignment was all about. It was probably to figure out, these are the themes of the books and all this stuff, right? It was boring. Anyways, I do this creative writing class and I get a 98%, right, in English for creative writing. It's everyone's like, you should just write. I was like, yeah, I'll tell that to everybody else. That tells me that I'm not good enough. So I don't care for it. It's okay, it's a credit, looks good on my entrance exam stuff, right? Awesome, great. I'm in university. And that one weekend I took Mr. Chang gave me a copy of, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. He gives me a copy of 3D Studio Max, which is a 3D program that uses AutoCAD and 3D software. And you can do animation on it. So I built the car, I learned how to model, light, shade, texture, animate, all in 3 days. I just take the software home, never used it, take it home. I learned in 3 days, build a presentation, and show it to the teacher. He's like, wow, you learned to do all this? Yeah, pretty easy stuff. Right? And it was such a terrible video. I probably have it somewhere. So anyway, the camera's doing loops and all this. Is so horrible. We win best presentation because it's a silly thing. Anyways, coming back to it. So I'm in chemistry lectures, 400 people in this lecture hall, right? I'm drawing characters and thinking, what am I doing in this class? I don't care about molecules. I don't care about nomenclature. And here's the thing I just realized. I'm terrible at chemistry because nomenclature is based on language. I can't remember anything to do with chemistry because I can't spell the damn thing. Right? So it's that's the whole career gone. So here I'm saying I'm dumb, but it might actually be because I might be dyslexic. Right? So I can't figure this shit out. Sorry.
You can okay. That's fine.
Talking about death and all of it.
Yeah. Chopped up guy on the road, but don't say the shit word.
Yeah.
Yes, this is part 1 of Aylwin's episode. Part 2 will be out on Thursday. And then a bit of a segue is to, especially now having Rowan with me, is Patreon. So one of the beautiful things that we're adding to Patreon for patrons at the $5 a month level and up is exclusive content. So we'll be having conversations to really dig into the concepts and topics that are discussed with the guests, and other themes and topics around like connection, coming together, building bridges across belief systems, mental health, trauma, triggers, all sorts of really incredible topics that we'll talk about as bonus content.
All interconnected.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
So
crossovers.
so that will have Patreon acting as a build upon point of the stories that are free and on all the different public platforms. So tiers start at $1 a month for early access episodes, and then $5 and $10 a month for bonus content, capacity to join, listen as a live audience at some of those higher tiers, and other live streams and more. So it's a really important way to keep this going. We don't get paid to do this. This has been a huge investment. This was Rowan raising their hand to say, hey, I'd love to help. And I'm like, cool, awesome.
Yeah. I'm actually also a Patreon supporter, so
yes,
in essence, I'm paying to like also be here, but also it does not feel like that at all. I think it's really important to support our grassroots in all different areas of like social justice connection, healing work, as well as, you know, help those extra community ties that you get on Patreon is just really amazing. And Patreon is actually a really cool community building place.
Absolutely, yeah. And especially now as like more people are coming in, it's an opportunity to connect with others who have similar desires as those listening. Like, let's find ways to come together. And what a beautiful place to find belonging in a group of people that are working on creating belonging.
Yeah.
Not in a culty way. Not in a culty way.